We're celebrating the bounty of the harvest season coming up next. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the Garden to Table. We've got an exciting show for you today. I mean, it's all about great food, but it's the harvest season. So we're having one of our harvest parties, and a great friend of mine from New York City's here. His name is Peter Hoffman. He comes from the Back 40 restaurant. We've got all kinds of things in today's show for you to see.
We'll prepare a hearty bean dish that's quite delicious. It incorporates farm fresh ingredients to take the flavor to the next level. Plus we'll mix up a savory sweet cocktail that you'll want to serve the next time you're having guests coming. And later on I'll show you a unique gardening option that utilizes one of my favorite grains.
So as you can see, we've got a lot in store for today's show. So why don't we get started? Guests are already arriving, but I want you to meet Peter. He's in the kitchen. Let's go.
So I'm Peter Hoffman. I own Back 40 restaurants in New York City. And we're gonna make a great dinner. I've been running my own restaurant for over 20 years, and the style that we developed there really is all about cooking seasonally and cooking from what's available to us and what's available to us locally. So that rather than be based in any one particular cuisine, we're really based in what's available. You go to the store, but it's not going to the store. We're going to the farmer's market. We're calling up our suppliers and seeing what's available. I think it's just wonderful to be out on a beautiful piece of property like this and cook the fall harvest and enjoy what comes off the land and get a real sense of what the beauty and the wealth of the land is.
Peter, I have to tell you, I love the name of your restaurant, the Back 40.
Oh, thank you. You know, even though we're in New York City, we wanted to reference for people to think about where their food comes from, that matters to us
Sure.
and should matter to them as well.
It's huge. Great name, and it's perfect for our Harvest Festival, our Tale of Two Farms. It's a great fit.
Right.
Now, I really appreciate you taking the time to focus on one of the recipes for our guests tonight, and to actually create this recipe within an amount or a volume that's you know, for the homeowner rather than 120 people, which is I think what we have coming tonight.
Yeah.
So what are we doing? We're working with some beans.
Well, we're going to make some red beans and give them some nice flavor, just with some very easy aromatics of carrot, celery, garlic, a little bit of fresh thyme from the garden, and you know, they're just a great accompaniment to meat, to other roasted vegetables, things like that. So I brought some red beans down from a grower in upstate New York.
They're beautiful.
And we soaked them overnight, and so that's going to shorten the cooking time. That's part of what we like about that. And so you can just go ahead, put them in the pot.
So these started as dried beans, and sort of what I understand about, or my experience with them, is the larger the bean, the longer they need to soak, and the longer they soak, the faster they cook, I guess.
Sure. You know, the other thing is that sometimes beans are old, and we know that we're getting fresh beans from, I mean, they're still dry, but they're from this year's harvest.
Right, right.
And so when beans are over dried, sometimes you'll have the experience that they'll never really rehydrate, and that's not, so they're kind of bad beans. They've been around for too long.
Sure.
So you want to be buying your beans from a place that they're moving product.
Yep, there you
go.
Now, any bean would work for this recipe, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's very simple preparation. You could do it with pinto beans. These are red beans. One of the heirloom beans that I like a lot that comes from up in Maine is called the Jacob's cattle bean.
Oh, I've never tried that.
I was hoping to bring it down for you, but
I may want to try to grow some of those this next year in the garden.
They're great.
Well, beans are one of those universal foods. I mean, in all cultures, you see them being used in some way. So I see you're just dropping the...
I'm just going to put the mirepoix, or that's French for aromatic mixed vegetables, in there.
Yep.
And we'll need to add a little bit more water.
Okay, so Peter, I'm going to just turn it on medium heat. How long do you think we need to let this cook?
Well, you're going to bring it up to a boil, and then you want to simmer them. You want to cook them nice and slow.
Right.
It might take up to an hour. What I like best is, in all my cooking, is that we're tasting all the way along. So taste them. The beans want to soften up. You don't want them mushy.
Yeah, I don't like mushy beans.
Right.
At all.
No, it falls apart and it just turns into sludge.
Yeah.
Here, what we're going for is a bean dish, and so that you know that there's still a little bit of toothsomeness there. I'm also going to put in a little bit of thyme. In a French restaurant, they might actually tie a string around it or strip it out. But I'm happy letting the leaves fall off the branch, and then we'll yank out the branch when they're done later.
And I like the water level. What I like to do is at least let everything get covered in water. So we've got the mirepoix, we've got the thyme, everything's covered in water, and we're ready to go.
Right. And there's one more thing. It's just like beans also want a little bit of fat in them, and there's so many different choices of fats. I'm really going to stay more in the Italian Mediterranean mode and add olive oil. And so again, you get nice slip in the mouth. From adding the olive oil.
I like that, slip in the mouth.
Yeah.
So what do you think, about a quarter of a cup there?
Yeah, something like that. And all of these measurements, they're not exact. You don't need a cookbook for it.
That's just the way I cook as well.
And we'll taste it. We'll see how it's coming along.
Yeah. You want to go out in the garden and see what we can scratch up?
Yeah, let's see what you got growing here.
That sounds good, okay. Peter, I want to show you this basil over here that I really have enjoyed, and I have to say it's been such a spectacular bloomer all summer long. It's called blue African basil. I guess blue because the flower stalks have that bluish color to them, yeah.
Well, the honeybees sure like them.
Yeah, they're sort of all over them this afternoon. So what do you think of the aroma?
Oh, the fragrance is really lovely.
Good? Mm-hmm. So what do you think for the salsa
So I think
verde?
it would be great to have some of these tender herbs in our salsa verde.
Now, your approach to herbs, I mean, you follow any specific principles about how you choose them, what flavors sort of lead?
Well, I think it's great to be able to go out in the garden and make the sauce from whatever you got growing.
Yeah.
But I like to do a balance between the annual soft flesh herbs and the hardier, more powerful, oily perennial herbs. And I don't want those flavors to dominate too much, so maybe it's sort of like 2/3 tender and 1/3 hardy.
Of course, this basil is a very tender herb. I mean, it doesn't really take much cold at all. In fact, we're looking at sort of its last days here. I think that's why the honeybees are working it so hard today. Mm-hmm. I tell you, it is probably one of about 7 different basils we try to grow every year. You think you got enough there?
Yep,
okay.
That's good.
All right, make sure we have plenty. Now I want to show you one of my pride and joys. Come on.
Sure.
So Peter, up here is a rosemary that I planted about, 5 years ago, and it has just continued to thrive, and it's come through all of our winters.
Right, it is huge.
Yeah, isn't it a big one?
Yeah.
We cut from it a lot. In fact, it seems like the more we cut off of this rosemary, the more she just produces. Mm-hmm. This variety is called ARP, and I think it's one of the hardier varieties. So this would be an example of what you're talking about, a perennial herb that is woodier, stemmier than the softer annual herbs.
That's right. And so it's very powerful, and you can overuse it, and then there's a bitterness that comes out in the sauce. So you want to be careful about that. So, and yet we want some of those base tones, some of that oil there. So, for depth and breadth. So we're going to put some in, but you just don't want to use too much.
Yeah, all right, very good. Great tips. Well, looks like we found plenty of herbs out there for our
Really
salsa verde.
nice, diverse set for us to work with.
Yeah. Now, what would you like for me to do? Just sort of strip the
Well, yeah,
leaves
pull,
off this basil?
pull the leaves off the stem. We don't want that going into our sauce. We like all the tender leaves. The flavors that predominate are the ones that are the tender leaves. So the mint and basil and parsley is what we're going to want. And then a little bit, sort of maybe 2/3 those tender leaves and 1/3 some of the hardier perennial herbs, like a little bit of rosemary, a little bit of oregano.
Something that has more of a woody stem to it.
Right.
Yeah.
So really, it's whatever you're growing, whatever's out there. You can make a nice mix. You can play with it. There are herbs that you could put in that we didn't have here today, but it really is whatever you feel like and making the mix. But you
Here's
just don't
some more
want
basil.
great.
Yep.
You just don't want too much of the woody herbs to predominate because they get oilier and stronger.
Right. Okay. Very good. Well, I'm going to work on a little parsley over here as well.
Great.
All right.
So, the key elements here are herbs. The base that's bringing all the flavors together is olive oil. We'll put that in a few moments.
Now let's go back just a moment to the sort of ratio of herbs, because I see that you're working on some of those garlic chives.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have kind of a rule of thumb, Peter, on like the ratio?
Well, this one is sort of on the, I don't know, under 25% presence here. I'm also going to put a little bit of garlic in as well. So that's going to bring some pungency to it.
Sure.
But again, I want the basils, the mints, and the parsleys to predominate.
So it looks like a couple tablespoons of basil.
Right?
Looks like you're going to end up with about
I suppose a tablespoon of the garlic chives.
and
But
here's
we'll
some,
pump up the
parsley here.
parsley, and I'm going to bring a little bit more of this mint into the mix.
Okay.
Because we don't have that in yet.
Right. And I have a little bit of thyme over here.
Yeah, why don't you give me one small branch of that
Okay.
and that oregano.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and strip the leaves off the thyme. So we've got just a little inventory here. We've got
2 basils, some garlic chives, a little bit of thyme,
and
parsley, mint, and a branch of oregano.
Yep.
That's
There.
going to be a nice mix.
So there's your thyme, and I'm giving you some oregano leaves here now. Sure.
So then we have to get in, so I said the olive oil, a little bit of garlic, and the secret ingredient, of course, is anchovies.
Aha!
Now, you might think that that's kind of a horrible thing to bring fish into a meal that's going to be served with
No,
lamb.
I love them, but people have very strong opinions about anchovies,
Well,
don't they?
you know, I grew up, the first anchovy I ever had was on a pizza, and it was a pretty awful anchovy, and it was really salty.
That parallels my experience.
And it really can be a terrific additive of sort of a flavor punch. And,
Sure.
and
Yes,
they
they're very
disappear.
intense.
You're not even going to know that that's in this. I mean, you're not going to eat anchovy. You know, it's the key ingredient in Worcestershire sauce.
That's
So-
amazing to me. You know, that and you would never think that.
Right. Well, that's the great spice is taken from the East, brought back by the colonialists to Britain, and it just melts away. So
yeah.
we,
Your point here that it's going to melt away.
Right.
Yeah.
So we buy salted anchovies. They have to get soaked in water, which I've done, and then it's kind of nice to actually it's the whole fish, and it's very easy to sort of peel it back and lift out the vertebrae, the
Yeah,
spine.
there you go.
So that doesn't have to be part of
Right,
it.
there you go. There's the flesh.
And there's the flesh, and you can just mash it.
You're just making a paste.
Right, and that's going to dissolve completely into our sauce.
Now, are you thinking one is enough, or do you want both of them?
No, I think one is going to suffice here.
Okay.
And so I'm going to pass over it with my knife a couple of times. I'm going to start to I'm going to get a little bit of the garlic in as well, so that as I'm working the two together.
Sure.
And again, you
Minced finely.
Minced finely. You can use a garlic press if you like.
Yes,
if you
you can
don't
just
have
crush it
this,
then.
you know, and because it's all gonna blend together.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna pass it once and then start working them together. You could do this nicely in a mortar and pestle also,
sure.
if you liked working that way.
Right.
Because, as I said,
Of course, that's going to crush everything into much more of a paste, isn't it?
Right.
And it's going to be interesting to see how you blend it here with the olive oil with all these fresh herbs. It smells wonderful, actually.
good, yeah. It's a great addition to
Now our
to
beans,
the,
while we were out, they've come along. Do you want me to add a little salt? or
yeah,
anything
just
about
like
that?
we want salt in our sauce here, we need that kind of flavoring as well in the beans. And so
Good.
we don't salt the beans right from the start. You want to take it, put the salt in when they're midway.
Why do you prefer to do it that way?
I mean, there's two things. Some people have said that it toughens up the outside of the bean and it makes it harder for
it
the
to
penetration
absorb
to
the
absorb.
flavor, right.
And so we certainly don't want to interfere with that at all. And the other thing is that you don't want to be over salting because the water's boiling off. So, but back here to the salsa, you know, once I have a nice little paste, it doesn't have to be completely a puree, but my garlic is broken down. I'm gonna just put it right in here with my herbs.
Looks like about a tablespoon.
Yeah, a good tablespoon. We ended up with, I don't know what that is, probably half a cup or more of herbs. And now I'm gonna loosen it and bind it. You know, loosen the anchovies, but bind it with the herbs with the addition of olive oil.
Right.
And the better the olive oil you buy, the better your sauce
This
is
is
going to
where
be.
you want to
This
use
is
your
where you-
really good olive oil.
Right.
Now,
That
okay.
little $15 a bottle. I'm adding the oil to sort of bring it all together. I'm going to want to have something that's,
Boy, you're
you know-
generous with it. Look at that.
oh yeah,
It's
because
beautiful.
we want to spoon it over the beans and have it have some of the oil actually.
Oh, that's beautiful, Peter.
Yeah, that's good. Now I'm going to taste it in just a minute, but I still don't have quite what I need.
Get a spoon.
And, oh yeah, come taste. We'll taste it before we add any lemon to it, but I'm going to want a little bit of brightness.
It's lovely. I can see where the lemon will make it even pop more.
Right. So I'm just going to squeeze here a touch. It's not a huge amount through my hands so that I don't get the seeds in and have to pick them out. And then let's taste again and see what we think. Now, it may be. So I like that, but I'm actually going to add a little bit of salt.
Yeah, the
You know?
anchovies brought some salt, but
Right, but it's
some. I
not quite
agree.
enough, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to go, well, I mean, I could put more anchovy in, but I like the flavor of where the anchovy is at. So we've got a little bit of more salt in. You could put black pepper in as well.
Yeah,
That's nice.
that's better. So what we have here, we have enough beans for 4, serving for 4 here. Perfect.
Let's have dinner.
Excellent. Peter, I'm so thrilled you're here. Thanks for
Yeah.
coming.
Absolutely.
Hi, I'm David Leathers, and I'm going to give you chef's tips a day on how to cut. First thing I want you to do is take something that's textured and place that on your cutting board so your cutting board doesn't slide, so you have good grip. Next thing is cutting anything that is round that could roll. Cut a little bit off of that product so a product sits flat, so then that product will not roll with you when cutting. The last thing I want to leave you with is this hand. It's all about this hand, your grip, your guide hand. You guide with this hand, and you want to pull those fingers in, not poking them out to cut. And that's actually, you're moving your guide hand to measure on how you're going to cut. And those are my 3 tips on how to cut in the kitchen.
This woman tempted me and took me for a ride. And like a little fox, I need a place to hide.
She walks through the corn leading down to the river. Her hair shone like gold in the hot morning sun. And she took.
I Okay, so this evening I've prepared for you folks a spiced Kieffer Martini. The Kieffer pears are actually grown here locally on Moss Mountain, and what I've done is I've cut them and cooked them for 48 hours. I did a 48-hour reduction with my own spices. I used cloves, cinnamon, white pepper, turmeric, and a little bit of cayenne. So once you drink it, there's a little bit of kick at the end of it, but it goes down really nicely.
I'm sure this is going to be
Yeah.
for some company dinner.
You know, there are a lot of ways to garden and grow things. Right here you can see that we have raised beds. We're growing things in containers of all kinds of varieties, including bushel baskets. And then there's straw bale gardening. Now I said straw bale, like in wheat straw gardening, not hay. Now the reason you don't want to use hay, you see hay can be harvested from fields where there is a wide range of plants growing in them. Plants that you don't want coming up in your garden. All those seeds will be present there, all kinds of grass seed. You're going to have all kinds of plants coming up in the way of weeds, and you're not going to like it. Now, I love to garden in raised beds, and a great way to do that is with bales of straw, and that's what we've used here. We've used wheat straw, and we've kept those bales confined to a space that's 2 bales wide by 7 bales long. You can't believe how much you can grow in a space like this. Now what I have planted here now are garlic chives, and I'm going to do some sweet potatoes in here a little later, but it's still a little early in the spring for the sweet potatoes. Last year what we did is we put down a weed barrier first in this area, and then we identified the perimeter and placed the bales of straw and put pins in them all the way around, or stakes to hold them in place, and then came in and started filling it in with lots of good soil. Now this year what I plan to do is I plan to plant tomato plants literally down in these straw bales like this. By pushing that plant down in there, there's so much moisture in these bales, having been out here for a full year, and there's actually nutrient that's seeped from the soil over into these. These plants are going to grow really well. Now I will add additional fertilizer just to supplement their growth, and you won't believe how many tomatoes I can grow out of one of these bales of straw. But one caveat, if you're starting this year with a fresh bale, you're going to have to water and fertilize it a little more than you are with these that have already been composting some. Give it a try. It's a fun way to garden. I really get into the decorations for our annual harvest dinner. This year we're focused on orange, perfect color of the season. Just look at these bouquets. They're filled with Gerbera daisies, tulips, lilies, hypericum berries, as well as some beautiful rose hips. Now if you'll notice, I have these in a little wicker basket, so the glass vase slides into it. And I've echoed that same wicker or vine up into the chandeliers. I've also carried the color there as well. In the chandeliers you can see I've used honeysuckle vine, Japanese lanterns, and bittersweet. Adds a whimsical touch to the chandeliers, and since these are everlastings, if you will, they'll last for a long time, unlike these little bouquets I've just placed on the table. Now you can see I've punctuated the table, really kind of 4 points with them, and I set them on a brown, in this case, a chocolate brown tablecloth, so they really set off beautifully. Now the reason we didn't do a centerpiece is because the way in which we're going to do the harvest dinner this year is family style. So we have tables set up in the barn, 10 per table, and what we'll do is we'll have the food brought out in various dishes, and they'll be placed in these spaces. And so by having 4 little flower arrangements gives me more flexibility on the table. I've got a basket here and a tea towel for bread, utensils for the food once it comes out. And then for the menu, you'll see that that's a single piece of cardboard. It was printed on with 2 holes punched in it, and we just rolled up a tea towel and took a piece of jute and tied it on there. So you have the napkin and you have the menu bound together. In the past, when I've done these harvest parties, we've had one big table, and that's great. It creates a communal type atmosphere. This year we're doing family style on tables of 10 to further that atmosphere of conviviality and fun. Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. All the guests are here and we're ready to have a great time. Until next time, good eating and good health.